Hello there, Ray here, and today joining me is Frog,
Hey everybody.
and today we're going to show you possibly one of the rarest mobs that you can obtain in survival. So as you guys know, on the Protect server, we tried to obtain the rarest mobs and items in the game. And recently we've been trying to obtain items that are, or mobs that are associated with 1.10, and one of these have been actually trap horses and the different variations of them. So here we have a trap horse being spawned in, and we have been going after different variations, one of them being the wither skeletons, which I have shown before, where we'd actually get a trap horse and send it into the nether dimension. And then from the nether dimension, we can be able to open it up just by becoming close to the actual trap horse. And once the trap horse is opened up, it will actually try to place a skeleton on top of it. And once since we're in the nether dimension, it can actually place the variation of the skeleton, which is the wither. So that's why you can see some wither skeletons on top of these skeleton horses. And you also can get normal skeletons as well. Now there's another variation of skeleton in the game, and that is actually the stray variation of the skeleton. So one of the things that we tried to obtain is actually a trap horse that's opened up, and when it's opened up, it actually has a stray riding on top of a skeleton horse. For a stray to spawn, it needs to have access to the sky, as well as being dark out. So the sky axis needs to be 15. It also needs to spawn inside of a biome that is cold, such as ice plains like we are in right now, or ice mountains, or ice spikes. Now you can see that we have some strays actually spawned in here, and this is because the environment is correct, so they can actually spawn. Now if you want to get a stray riding on top of a skeleton horse, you first need to have a trap horse. So if you had a trap horse in this environment, now you would think typically if you just open this trap horse inside of an icy biome, then it would allow the game to place a stray variation of the skeleton on top of this horse. But as you can see, even if you try this multiple times, every time the trap horse is opened up, we only get normal skeletons, and we're not getting any variations of the stray. So after trying to spawn in a stray riding on top of a skeleton horse and having it not worked, we had to look into the code. So I asked Frog here if he could look into the code and see why strays were not actually spawning inside of icy biomes like you would expect them to do.
Okay, so what's going on here, the reason why you don't get strays riding on skeleton horses is because of a small bug in Minecraft 1.10. And so what I want to do is just really quickly describe the bug to you, sort of what's causing this. And then we'll also look at a way of getting around the bug so you actually can spawn strays riding skeletons. Okay, and so to understand this, there's sort of three important things that happen when the game spawns a skeleton. The first one is that it creates the skeleton entity. So this is just a representation of the skeleton in the game. And then normally what happens is you go and you set the position of the skeleton to be the place where it should spawn. And finally, you run some initialization code on that skeleton, which does a couple of things. But for us, the important thing that it does is it chooses which kind of skeleton it should be, right? So if the skeleton happens to be in the nether, then it decides to make it a wither with 80% probability. And similarly, if you're in a nice icy biome, then what happens is it checks to see if the skeleton has sky access. And if it does, then you get 80% chance of spawning a stray instead. Okay? And so the problem with the trapped horses is that they sort of do these things in slightly the wrong order. So like normal, it creates the skeleton entity. But then before it sets the position of the skeleton, it initializes the skeleton first. Okay, and so the important thing there is that the position hasn't been set yet. And then after the initialization code has been run, it goes and it moves the skeleton to the correct spawn point. And so the reason why this doesn't affect getting wither skeletons riding the skeleton horses is that the code for that just checks to see if the skeleton is in the nether or not. And that's kind of independent of your position. But if you try to check to see if you should spawn a stray, since this position hasn't been set yet, it fails to detect that we're in an icy biome, and it just spawns a regular skeleton. Okay, so the reason why we weren't getting strays spawning on the skeletons is because, when it goes to check to see what kind of skeleton it should spawn, the position of the skeleton hadn't been set yet, and so it didn't realize that we're actually in an ice biome and that the skeleton had sky access. And so a natural question to wonder about is, where is it actually doing the check, right? Like the code still checks the position of the skeleton entity, it just hasn't been updated yet. And so it turns out that if you look at the code, the default position for an entity is actually at the location 000. And so what's happening is the game is not checking where the skeleton is supposed to spawn, but it actually goes and it looks at the world location 000, and it checks to see if that's in an ice biome and if it has sky access. And if that's true, then it's going to spawn a stray with 80% chance.
Okay, so let's go over to 00. You've seen that the stray does not come out of this variation. So if we head over to 0, 0, which takes us here, we are in a icy biome, but what else do we need, Frog?
I guess we need to have some sky access for the block at 0, 0, 0, which is at the bottom of the world.
So for the stray to spawn in, it needs to have the sky axis, and it checks at 0, 0. So here we're at 0, 0, 0 in the world, and this is the very lowest block, and it happens to be bedrock. So if you would break all this bedrock, including this one down here, now there is a sky axis of 15. So let's head back and see if we can actually get it to work now. So now if we come in and we summon in a trap horse, and we would open that trap horse up, we can see that we actually get some stray variations inside of these horsemen. So it has nothing to do about which biome you actually open up the trap horse, but instead what type of biome you have at 0, 0, as well as having sky axis down at the very bottom of the world. Now this only applies to 1.10, and 1.10 is the version which they added the stray variation of the skeleton, and this is also removed in 1.11 because in 1.11 they already changed the stray to no longer be a variation of the skeleton and instead be an entirely different mob on its own. So only in 1.10 can you actually have the game be able to open up a horseman and have it actually choose between a wither skeleton or a stray. Now if you do this in 1.11, it would just look at it and just apply the skeleton and put a skeleton on top of it, and it wouldn't try to place a stray or a wither skeleton because both of those are new entities in 1.11. Now, so if you would want to do this, you'd have to do this in 1.10. You'd also need to have a icy biome at your 0, 0 point in your world, as well as break down the bedrock all the way down to 0, 0 so that you have sky access there.
All right, so in 1.11 and 1.12, this bug is technically still in the game. The game still runs the initialization code for a skeleton before it sets the position when they're being spawned from a trapped horse. But it turns out that in 1.11, since strays and withers are their own entity types, this initialization code is not actually responsible for just deciding which skeleton spawns, and so it has no real effect on gameplay.
Also in this version, there is a slight bug where you can see that strays that have enchanted armor will have a more darker cloak on compared to ones that do not have enchanted armor. Now this is actually fixed in the more current version. And that's why it just looks a little bit different here, because we are actually in 1.10 to show this off. So as we have shown, it can be extremely difficult to actually get this type of mob in the game. And this could actually be one of the rarest type of mobs you could get in survival. Now you can actually make this mob a little bit more rare to obtain by getting a couple different accessories, such as getting a jack-o'-lantern head on the stray, and this only occurs during Halloween, which is one day out of the year. It's a 2.5% chance of actually getting that on a mob, as well as also mobs can also have their main weapon in their right hand or their left hand. Most of the time it's in the right hand, but there's a 5% chance that it will be in their left hand. So this type of mob can be extremely rare to get in survival, and is probably one of the rarest type of mobs that you could actually obtain. Unfortunately, on the Protect server, our 0, 0 point is in a ocean biome instead of a icy biome, so we cannot actually obtain this type of stray on the Protect server. Big thanks to Frog, who actually looked into the code and found where the bug occurred. You can check out his channel in the video's description. So there you have it, guys, how to obtain one of the rarest types of mobs in survival. There will be a link in the description to this world if you would like to check it out. So if you found this interesting, show me with a like. If you'd like to see more technical Minecraft, subscribe, and don't forget to comment.
See ya.
Bye-bye.